The fluorescent lights of Toronto General Hospital buzzed overhead as I lay on the operating table, trying to keep my breathing steady. At 63 years old, I'd faced down aggressive business competitors, survived 2 recessions, and buried both my parents. But nothing had prepared me for what I was about to discover during what should have been a routine colonoscopy. My name is Robert Ashford, and until that March morning in 2024, I thought I knew everything about my wife of 28 years. The sedation was taking hold, that familiar drowsy feeling creeping through my veins. Dr. Helena Petrov, the gastroenterologist my family physician had recommended, was adjusting something on her equipment. I could hear the quiet beeping of monitors, the rustle of surgical gowns, the muted conversation between medical staff. Then I heard her voice, lower than before, speaking to the surgical nurse. "Is his wife still in the waiting room?" "Yes, doctor. She's reading a magazine by the window." There was a pause. Then Dr. Petrov said something that made my blood turn to ice, even through the warming blanket draped over me. "Good. When we're finished here, I need you to give her this envelope. Make absolutely certain Robert doesn't see it. She needs to have it first. Do you understand? This is critical." I kept my eyes closed, kept my breathing even and slow. Every instinct screamed at me to sit up, to demand answers, but some deeper survival mechanism held me still. Through the haze of medication, one thought burned clear. What envelope? Why did my wife need to see something that I couldn't? "Understood, doctor," the nurse replied. "Should I bring it out before he's in recovery?" "Yes. As soon as he's stable but still under. Margaret needs time to prepare." Margaret. My wife. My partner of nearly 3 decades. The woman who'd stood beside me through the collapse of my first business, through the deaths of our parents, through raising our 2 sons. What could she possibly need to prepare for? The procedure continued, but I barely registered it. My mind was racing despite the sedation, cycling through possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. By the time Dr. Petrov finished and I was wheeled into recovery, I'd made a decision. I would stay groggy longer than necessary. I would wait, watch, and find out what secret was being kept from me in my own medical procedure. In recovery, I kept my eyes mostly closed, breathing deeply and evenly. Through my lashes, I could see the nurse young, maybe 30, with kind eyes and a professional demeanor check my vitals and then slip out of the room. She returned 10 minutes later, glanced at me to confirm I was still asleep, and then I heard her footsteps retreat down the hallway toward the waiting area. 15 minutes crawled by. 20. Then I heard Margaret's voice in the hallway, thanking someone. Her footsteps approached my recovery bay, but they were slower than usual, hesitant. When she finally appeared around the curtain, I could see through my half-closed eyes that she was holding something, a manila envelope, letter-sized, unsealed. Her hands were shaking. I'd seen Margaret handle corporate lawyers, difficult contractors on our home renovations, and our teenage son's rebellion with steady hands. I'd never seen them shake like this. She pulled the visitor's chair close to my bedside and sat down heavily. For a long moment, she just stared at the envelope. Then, with movements that looked almost mechanical, she reached inside and pulled out what appeared to be a photograph. The sound she made, a small, choked gasp, sent adrenaline surging through my sedated system. I wanted to open my eyes fully, to demand answers, but I forced myself to wait, to see what she would do. "Oh God," she whispered. "Helena actually kept them. After all these years." "Helena, Dr. Petrov. They knew each other?" Margaret was crying now, silent tears running down her face as she stared at whatever was in that photograph. She reached into the envelope again and pulled out what looked like documents, several sheets of paper, folded together. As she unfolded them, I could see they were old, yellowed slightly with age. From my limited vantage point, I could make out what looked like a marriage certificate header. My heart began to pound so hard I worried the monitors would give me away. Margaret sat there for another 5 minutes, reading through the documents, occasionally wiping her eyes. Then she carefully placed everything back in the envelope, tucked it into her large purse, and composed herself. By the time the nurse came to check on me again, my wife's face was calm, pleasant even. Only the slight redness around her eyes betrayed anything amiss. "How's he doing?" Margaret asked, her voice steady. "Coming around nicely," the nurse replied. "Should be fully alert in about 20 minutes. "Good," Margaret said, and I could hear something in her voice I'd never heard before, a calculated coolness. I'll just step out to make a quick phone call before he wakes up. Can you let him know I'll be right back?" After she left, I finally allowed my eyes to open fully. The nurse smiled at me. "Welcome back, Mr. Ashford. How are you feeling?" "Groggy," I managed, which wasn't entirely a lie. "My wife? She'll be right back. Just stepped out to make a call. Let me get you some water." As soon as she left, I sat up slowly, fighting the remaining effects of the sedation. My mind was clearer now, focused by shock and confusion into something sharp and purposeful. A marriage certificate. Helena Petrov, a name Margaret had never mentioned in 28 years. An envelope that had to be kept secret from me. The pieces didn't fit together yet, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was going to find out what was in that envelope, and I was going to find out what my wife had been hiding all these years. When Margaret returned, I was sitting up, sipping water, looking appropriately post-procedure groggy. She kissed my forehead, asked how I felt, and made small talk about the weather and the traffic getting to the hospital. She was good, very good. If I hadn't witnessed her reaction to that envelope, I never would have suspected anything was wrong. Dr. Petrov said everything looked fine, Margaret told me as we waited for my discharge papers. No polyps, no concerns. She said you're healthy as a horse. That's good, I said carefully. She seems like a competent doctor. Have you ever met her before? She seemed to know you. It was a small test, subtle enough to be innocent curiosity. But I saw at a microsecond of hesitation, a tiny tightening around her eyes. "No, I don't think so," Margaret said smoothly. "Maybe she just has one of those faces. You know how it is." She was lying. After 28 years, I could read my wife's tells, subtle as they were. She was lying to my face, and she was doing it well. The drive home to our house in North York was quiet. Margaret chattered about needing to stop at the grocery store, about our son Michael calling from Vancouver, about the landscaping company coming next week. Normal, mundane things. But her purse, that expensive leather bag I'd bought her for Christmas 3 years ago, sat between us in the car like a bomb, containing whatever secrets Dr. Helena Petrov had decided I wasn't allowed to know. That night, after Margaret thought I was asleep, I heard her get up. Through the crack in the bathroom door, I watched her take the envelope from her purse and study its contents again. The way she held that photograph with both hands, as if it was something precious and terrible, at once told me this wasn't just a medical matter. This was personal. This was old. The next morning, I called my lawyer. Thomas Brennan had handled my business affairs for 15 years. He was discreet, thorough, and didn't ask unnecessary questions. When I told him I needed a private investigator, someone who could look into my wife's background quietly and efficiently, he gave me a name without hesitation. "Robert," he said carefully. "Are you sure about this?" Sometimes, it's better not to know." "I'm sure," I told him. "Someone gave my wife an envelope during my medical procedure yesterday. Whatever was in it, I wasn't supposed to see it. I need to know what my own wife is hiding from me." The investigator, a former RCMP officer named Sarah Chen, met me at a Tim Hortons near my office in downtown Toronto 2 days later. I gave her everything I knew: Margaret's full name, Margaret Louise Ashford, née Turner, her date of birth, her hometown of Thunder Bay, Ontario, and the name Helena Petrov. "Find out if they knew each other," I told Sarah. "Find out why a doctor would have documents she felt my wife needed to see in secret. Find out what my wife's been hiding for 28 years. Sarah looked at me with something like pity. "Mr. Ashford, in my experience, when medical professionals are involved in revealing old secrets, it usually means those secrets are about to come out anyway. Someone's trying to give your wife a chance to control the narrative." "Then I need to know the truth before she decides what story to tell me," I replied. It took Sarah less than a week. She met me at my office on a gray April morning, carrying a folder that looked far too thick for comfort. She closed the door behind her, sat down across from my desk, and said, "Mr. Ashford, how much do you know about your wife's life before she met you?" "We met in 1996, I said. She was 29, working as an executive assistant at a consulting firm. She'd moved to Toronto from Thunder Bay 2 years earlier. She told me she'd never been married, had focused on her career." I paused. That's what she told me. Sarah opened the folder. Margaret Louise Turner married Dr. Helena Petrov in Boston, Massachusetts in June 1994. At that time, Helena was completing her residency at Massachusetts General Hospital. The marriage lasted approximately 14 months. Divorce was finalized in August 1995, in Boston. The world seemed to tilt slightly. That's impossible. We met in 1996. She told me she'd never been married. There's more, Sarah said quietly. She pulled out a photograph, a wedding photo. A younger Margaret, maybe 27 or 28, wearing an elegant cream-colored suit, standing beside another woman in a matching ensemble. Both of them were beaming at the camera, holding hands. The woman beside Margaret was unmistakably a younger version of Dr. Helena Petrov. My wife had been married to a woman. My wife had been married before she met me. My wife had lied to me for 28 years. They met when Margaret was working as a medical administrative assistant in Boston, Sarah continued. According to divorce records, the marriage ended due to, and I'm quoting here, irreconcilable differences regarding family planning and lifestyle choices. Helena wanted children. Margaret didn't want to raise children in a same-sex household in the mid-1990s. The cultural climate was very different then. I stared at the photograph. This was my wife, the woman I'd shared a bed with for nearly 3 decades. The woman who'd raised 2 sons with me. The woman I'd trusted implicitly, and I'd never known this fundamental truth about her past. After the divorce, Sarah went on. Margaret moved back to Canada, first to Thunder Bay, then to Toronto in 1994. She changed career paths, buried her previous life. When Dr. Petrov completed her fellowship, she also moved to Toronto in 2003. She's been practicing gastroenterology at Toronto General since then. 20 years, I said slowly. They've both been in Toronto for 20 years. Has Margaret been in contact with her? I can't confirm that definitively, Sarah admitted. But here's what I can tell you. Dr. Petrov never remarried. She focused on her career, became one of the top gastroenterologists in Canada, and when she saw your name on her appointment schedule 3 weeks ago, she would have recognized it. She would have known exactly who you were, Margaret Turner's husband. The envelope, the secret document exchange. It all made a horrifying kind of sense. She wanted Margaret to have a chance to tell me first, I said, before I saw some document that would reveal the truth. That's why she gave her the envelope while I was sedated. Sarah nodded. That would be my assessment. The question is, Mr. Ashford, what are you going to do with this information? I sat in my office for a long time after Sarah left, staring at that wedding photograph. Margaret looked happy in it, genuinely, radiantly happy in a way I'd rarely seen in our own wedding photos. Young and hopeful and in love. And she'd hidden it from me for 28 years. That evening, I came home to find Margaret in the kitchen, preparing dinner like she did every Thursday. Our sons were both grown and living in other cities, Michael in Vancouver, Daniel in Montreal. It was just the 2 of us now. Had been for 5 years since Daniel left for university. 5 years of empty nest, of comfortable routines, of what I'd thought was hard-earned marital contentment. Margaret, I said quietly, setting my briefcase down. We need to talk. She froze, her back to me, one hand on the cutting board. Then she slowly set down the knife she'd been using and turned around. You know, she said, it wasn't a question. I know you were married before, to Dr. Helena Petrov, in Boston, and I know you lied to me for 28 years about it. The color drained from her face. She gripped the counter behind her for support. How did you? I wasn't as sedated as you thought during the procedure. I heard Helena tell the nurse to give you an envelope. I saw you read it. And then I hired an investigator because my own wife couldn't be honest with me. Margaret closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were wet with tears. Robert, please, let me explain. Explain what, exactly? Explain how you lied about never being married? Explain how you hid a fundamental part of your identity? Explain how you've let me believe I knew you when I never really did? My voice was rising now. Years of trust cracking apart. What else have you lied about, Margaret? Our entire marriage? Our sons? Don't you dare, she said, her voice suddenly sharp. Don't you dare question our sons. They are yours biologically, completely, unquestionably yours. I have never betrayed you that way. Just every other way, I shot back. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. Then she pulled out a chair and sat down heavily at the kitchen table. You're right, she said quietly. You're absolutely right to be angry. But please, Robert, let me tell you the whole story. You deserve that much. I sat down across from her, my heart pounding with a mixture of rage and grief, and something that felt uncomfortably close to curiosity. Margaret took a shaky breath. I met Helena in 1993 at Mass General. I was working in the administrative office. She was a resident. We fell in love completely, intensely, in the way you do when you're young and you finally found someone who understands you. We got married the summer after she finished her residency. She twisted her wedding ring, my ring around her finger as she spoke. For about a year, we were happy. But then reality set in. This was 1994. Robert. Same-sex marriage wasn't legal in Canada yet. It was barely legal in Massachusetts. Helena wanted children, desperately wanted to start a family, adopt, build a life. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't bring children into a world where they'd be ostracized for having two mothers, where we'd have to hide or fight every single day just to exist. So you left, I said. So I left, she confirmed. I broke both our hearts because I was a coward, because I couldn't be brave enough to live that life, even though I loved her. The divorce was devastating. I moved home to Thunder Bay, spent a year working in my father's hardware store, trying to figure out who I was. She looked up at me then, and I saw real pain in her eyes. When I moved to Toronto, I made a decision. I decided that part of my life was over, that I would live the life I'd been too afraid to live before, the conventional one, the easy one. And then I met you. Did you ever love me? I asked, the question burning in my throat. Or was I just convenient? I loved you, Margaret said fiercely. I love you still. Robert, you have to understand sexuality isn't always binary. I loved Helena. I love you. Both of those things can be true. You gave me the family I wanted without the fight I couldn't face. You gave me safety, stability, 2 beautiful sons. You gave me a good life, a life built on lies, I said bitterly. A life built on choices, she corrected. Choices I made because I was scared and flawed and human. Yes, I should have told you. I know that. But how do you tell your husband of 10 years that you were once married to a woman? How do you explain that at 20 years? At 28? When do you dismantle everything someone believes about you? How about at the beginning? I said. How about before I married you, when I could have made an informed decision about who I was committing my life to? She nodded, tears streaming down her face now. You're right. You're absolutely right. I was selfish and scared. I thought if I never told you, it would be like it never happened. Like I could just be Margaret Ashford and never have to be Margaret Petroff again. Why now? I asked. Why did Helena give you that envelope now, after all these years? Margaret pulled a tissue from her pocket and wiped her eyes. Because she's dying, Robert. She has pancreatic cancer, stage 4. She has maybe 6 months left, and she wanted to give me the chance to tell you myself before you found out some other way. Before her obituary ran in the papers mentioning her former spouse, and our sons asked questions. She was trying to protect me, one last time, even after everything I put her through. The anger that had been burning in my chest flickered and dimmed slightly. Not extinguished, not even close, but complicated now, by the image of a dying woman trying to spare her ex-wife pain, even decades after their divorce. She must really have loved you, I said quietly. She did, Margaret whispered. And I broke her heart. And then I built a new life and broke yours too, apparently. I'm very good at destroying things, Robert. We sat in silence for a long moment, the kitchen settling into shadow as the sun set outside our window. 28 years of marriage, reduced to this moment of brutal honesty. Finally, I said, I need time. I need to process this. I need to figure out if I can trust you again, if we can rebuild from this. I understand, Margaret said. Whatever you need. I'm going to stay at the condo downtown for a while, I told her. I owned a small investment property near the financial district, kept it for out-of-town business visitors. I'll call you when I'm ready to talk more. She nodded, not protesting. Robert, for what it's worth, I am truly, deeply sorry. You deserved better than this. You deserved the truth. I stood up and walked out of the house we'd shared for 23 years, leaving my wife crying at the kitchen table. As I drove toward downtown, my phone rang. It was Michael, our oldest son, calling from Vancouver. Hey, Dad, he said cheerfully. Just checking in. How'd the colonoscopy go? I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. It was revealing, I said, very revealing. Over the next few weeks, I told both of our sons what I'd discovered. Their reactions were markedly different. Daniel, our younger son at 24, was philosophical. I mean, it's weird, yeah, he said when I told him over coffee in Montreal. But Mom's always been Mom. This doesn't change who she is to us. She's still the woman who drove me to hockey practice at 6 a.m. every Saturday. She's still the person who talked me through my first heartbreak. She just has a more complicated past than we knew. Michael, older and more cynical at 26, was harder. She lied to you for my entire life, Dad. To all of us. That's not just complicated, that's betrayal. How are you supposed to trust her again? I don't know, I admitted. I honestly don't know. What I didn't tell either of them was that I'd reached out to Dr. Helena Petrov. It took me 2 weeks to work up the courage, but I finally called her office and asked if she'd be willing to meet with me outside of a medical context. To her credit, she agreed immediately. We met at a small cafe in the annex, away from the hospital, away from prying eyes. Helena looked older than she had in the surgical suite, thinner, with the telltale signs of chemotherapy, but her eyes were sharp and kind when she greeted me. "Mr. Ashford," she said, shaking my hand, "thank you for agreeing to meet." "I think I'm the one who should be thanking you," I said as we sat down. "You tried to give Margaret a chance to tell me the truth herself." Helena smiled sadly. "I'm not sure my methods were ideal. Medical ethics aside, it was probably inappropriate, but when I saw your name on my schedule, and I realized Margaret had never told you about our marriage, I couldn't let you find out by accident. She deserved better than that, even if I'm angry at her for how things ended between us." "Are you?" I asked. "Angry?" She considered the question, stirring sugar into her coffee. "I was, for many years, devastated, really. But time and terminal cancer have a way of putting things in perspective. Margaret made the choice she needed to make for herself, even if it destroyed me at the time. She couldn't be brave enough to live an openly gay life in the mid-90s, and I couldn't pretend to be something I wasn't. We were incompatible in a fundamental way, and staying married would have made us both miserable." "She said you wanted children," I ventured. Helena's face softened. "I did, very much. I never had them. My career took precedence, and then I never met anyone I wanted to build that life with after Margaret. But you have 2 sons with her. She got the family she wanted, just not with me." There was no bitterness in her voice, just a kind of wistful acceptance that made my chest ache. "Do you think she loves me?" I asked, and felt immediately foolish for asking this dying woman to reassure me about my own marriage. But Helena didn't laugh. She looked at me seriously and said, "I think Margaret loves safety and stability and the version of herself she gets to be with you. Whether that's the same as romantic love, that's something only you two can figure out. But I will tell you this. She did love me, truly and completely, and she gave that up because she was terrified of what that love would cost her. So yes, I think she's capable of loving you. The question is whether she loves you for who you are, or for what you represent." Those words haunted me for days afterward. What did I represent to Margaret? A shield against her own identity? A convenient facade? Or a genuine partner and companion? I thought about our 28 years together. The way she'd supported me through business failures and successes. The way she'd raised our sons with patience and wisdom. The way she'd held my hand at my father's funeral. The way she laughed at my terrible jokes. The way she still kissed me goodbye every morning, even after all these years. Were those things real? Or were they just the performance of a woman who decided to live a life that wasn't entirely her own? It took me 6 weeks to go back home. 6 weeks of living in the sterile investment condo, of therapy sessions, of long conversations with my sons, of sleepless nights, staring at the ceiling and wondering if my entire adult life had been based on a fundamental misunderstanding. When I finally walked back through the door of our North York house, Margaret was in the garden, planting tomatoes. It was late May, the weather finally warm enough for tender plants. She looked up when she heard the door, and I saw hope and fear war across her face. "Can we talk?" I asked. We sat on the back deck, the spring sunshine warm on our faces, and I told her what I'd decided. "I can't pretend this didn't happen," I said. "I can't just forget that you lied to me for 28 years. But I also can't pretend that those 28 years meant nothing. We built a life together, Margaret. We raised 2 good men. We had joy and sorrow and everything in between. That was real, even if it was built on an incomplete truth." She nodded, not speaking, letting me finish. I want to try to rebuild trust. I want to go to counseling together. I want you to be honest with me about who you really are, even the parts that scare you. And I want us to figure out if we can have a marriage based on complete honesty, or if we need to let each other go. I'll do whatever it takes, Margaret said quietly. I promise you, Robert, no more lies, no more hiding. Whatever you want to know, I'll tell you. Okay, I said. Then let's start here. Are you still attracted to women? She took a deep breath. Yes. I'm bisexual, though I didn't have that language 30 years ago. I'm attracted to both men and women. I chose to be with you, and I've never cheated on you. Never even been tempted to. But yes, that part of me didn't just disappear when I married you. It hurt to hear, but it was honest. Thank you for telling me. We talked for hours that day, Margaret answering every question I asked, no matter how difficult. She told me about her first girlfriend in college, about the struggle to accept herself, about the joy and terror of falling in love with Helena, about the pain of choosing safety over authenticity. Do you regret it? I asked finally. The choice you made? She thought about it for a long time before answering. I regret lying to you. I regret not being brave enough to live my truth. But I don't regret my sons, and I don't regret the good parts of our marriage. I just wish I could have had all of it, the honesty and the family and the love. I wish I could have been braver. It's not too late, I told her. We can be honest now. We can figure out what our marriage looks like with all the cards on the table. That was 4 months ago. I won't lie and say it's been easy. Counseling has been painful, productive, and revelatory. I've learned things about my wife. I never knew her struggles with identity, her fears, her dreams she'd set aside. And she's learned things about me too, how deeply her deception cut, how much I value honesty above almost everything else, how willing I am to fight for our marriage if she meets me halfway. Margaret visited Helena 3 times before she died in July. I encouraged her to go, to make peace with that part of her past. She came home from the funeral red-eyed but calmer than I'd seen her in months. She forgave me, Margaret told me that night. At the end, she told me she forgave me for leaving, and she hoped I'd found happiness. She said she was glad I had you, that you seemed like a good man. I thought about Helena Petrov, a woman I'd met only once, who'd loved my wife long before I did, who'd tried to protect her, even while dying. She was right to love you, I said. You're worth loving, Margaret. Flaws and secrets and all. We're still rebuilding. Trust doesn't return overnight, and there are days when I look at Margaret and wonder what else I don't know. But there are also days when I look at her and see not just my wife of 28 years, but a complex, flawed human being who made difficult choices in a difficult time. A woman who's finally being honest with herself and with me about who she really is. Our sons have been supportive in their own ways. Daniel treats it as ancient history, something interesting but not particularly relevant to his relationship with his mother. Michael needed more time, more conversations, more reassurance that the mother he knew was still the same person. But they both came home for Thanksgiving, and we sat around our table as a family, and it felt both familiar and entirely new. If I could go back and tell my younger self what I'd discovered during that colonoscopy, would I? I honestly don't know. Part of me wishes I'd never heard Dr. Petrov's words to that nurse, never learned about the marriage Margaret had hidden. Ignorance was certainly more comfortable. But another part of me, the part that spent the last 4 months really talking to my wife, really knowing her for the first time, is grateful for the painful truth. Because you can't truly love someone you don't truly know. And I'm finally beginning to know Margaret, not just the careful version she presented for 28 years, but the whole, complicated, bisexual, scared, brave, flawed, loving woman she actually is. Is our marriage saved? I don't know yet. We're taking it one day at a time, one honest conversation at a time. But I do know this. Whatever happens, we're finally building something on truth instead of omission, and that has to count for something. Last week, I went back to Toronto General for my follow-up appointment. I requested a different gastroenterologist, not because I bear any ill will toward Helena's memory, but because some chapters need to close before new ones can begin. As I sat in the waiting room, I thought about that March morning 4 months ago, about hearing those fateful words through my anesthesia haze, about the envelope that changed everything, about the choices we make to protect ourselves and the collateral damage those choices create. And I thought about something my therapist told me last week. Robert, You can't change the past. You can't undo 28 years of half-truths. But you can decide how you move forward from here. You can decide whether to let this destroy you or to let it transform you into something more honest, even if that's painful. I choose transformation. I choose painful honesty over comfortable lies. I choose to know my wife completely, even if what I learn sometimes hurts. I choose to rebuild trust brick by difficult brick, because the alternative, walking away from 28 years without trying to salvage what's real, feels like a waste of all the love we did share, whatever its foundations. Margaret and I are planning a trip to Newfoundland next month, just the two of us. Neither of us has been there before. It seems fitting, somehow exploring new territory together, with no preconceptions, no hidden histories. Just two people in their 60s, trying to figure out if they can build something true from the rubble of revealed secrets. I don't know how this story ends. Maybe we make it, maybe we don't. Maybe trust can be rebuilt, maybe it can't. But I do know this. I'd rather live with difficult truths than comfortable lies. I'd rather know the real Margaret, flawed and complex as she is, than the carefully curated version she presented for nearly 3 decades. Because at the end of the day, love without honesty is just a beautiful prison, and I'm too old to live in a cage, even a golden one. So to anyone reading this, anyone who's discovered that the person they love has been hiding fundamental truths, you have a choice. You can run from the pain, or you can walk through it towards something more real. Neither path is easy, neither path is wrong. But I can tell you from experience that the path through the pain, while agonizing, at least leads somewhere true. And truth, I've learned, is worth the price of admission, even when that price is everything you thought you knew about your life. The colonoscopy showed I was healthy. Everything looked fine, the doctor said. No polyps, no concerns, clean bill of health. If only the same could be said for my marriage. But we're working on it. One honest, painful, necessary conversation at a time. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough.